Hi students, and welcome to another Mr. Ness screencast. Today's aim is mercantilism, salutary neglect, and the French and Indian War. And here are your objectives. Please pause the video, look these questions over, and get ready to copy some vocab terms and take some notes. All right, let's start by looking at this map, which shows North America in the year 1750. Remember, England had settled 13 colonies along the east coast of North America in order to make money off of natural resources, and those colonies are shown here in yellow. If you look at the map, you'll see that there were two other European countries besides England that also controlled colonies in North America. To the west of the 13 colonies was all this land in green, colonized by France, and to the south was all this land in pink, colonized by Spain. So there was a lot of competition between Europeans for this land in North America. Also, there were millions of Native Americans already living on this land. Relations between Europeans and Native Americans were never good, but we can say that in general, the British colonists got along worse with the Native Americans than the French colonists did. So, the British colonists needed their king's army to protect them against the French colonists, the Spanish colonists, and Native Americans. The next term you need to know is mercantilism. Mercantilism is a word that we use to describe the economic relationship between the King of England, who I'll call the mother country, and the English people that lived in the 13 colonies, who I'll call the colonists. The goal of the King of England was to use the colonists to make his country as rich as possible. And he did that through this system or policy called mercantilism. Here's the main rule of mercantilism. The colonists were only allowed to buy and sell goods to merchants from the mother country, which was England, also called Britain. So the British colonists sold their natural resources to British merchants, who then shipped the goods to England and sold them to British manufacturers. The manufacturers in England turned those natural resources into manufactured goods and then sold them back to the colonists or to other people in England. Again, the colonists could only buy and sell goods to and from British merchants. The name of the law that laid out these rules of mercantilism was called the Navigation Acts. In this image, you can see that natural resources, also called raw materials, were sent from the colonies to the mother country, England, and in return, the manufactured goods made in England were sent back to the colonies to be sold to the colonists. No other countries besides England were allowed to be involved in this process. Now let's look at some benefits and drawbacks of mercantilism. First, the benefits. The King of England benefited from the money he got by taxing the colonist trade. Meanwhile, manufacturers in England benefited by gaining access to all the valuable natural resources of the 13 colonies. Finally, British merchants benefited by getting a monopoly on the colonists' business. And the colonists benefited from the protection that they got from the British military against attacks by Native Americans and colonists from their other European rivals like France. But mercantilism also had drawbacks, especially for the colonists, and the main problem was that it limited their ability to do business with whoever they wanted. Sometimes merchants from France or Spain sold products that the colonists needed at lower prices, but the colonists couldn't buy them. Or France and Spain paid more money for the natural resources that the colonists had to sell than the British merchants did. But again, the colonists were not allowed to take advantage of that because they were not allowed to do business with any other countries. Fortunately for the colonists, for most of the history of the 13 colonies, the mercantile laws like the Navigation Acts weren't actually enforced. The laws existed on paper, but the King of England basically decided not to enforce them. And the result was that the colonists openly broke the rules, buying and selling with anyone they wanted, no matter which country they were from. And they didn't get in trouble. England had a hands-off policy and left the colonists alone. And we call that hands-off policy salutary neglect. Salutary means healthy. And for the colonists, being neglected by England was a good thing. They liked it because salutary neglect let them make their own decisions, including the ability to trade with anyone they wanted to. We'll return to the idea of salutary neglect in the next lesson. The last topic in this video is the French and Indian War, which started in the year 1756 and lasted until 1763. Be careful. The French and Indian War sounds like it's a war between the French and the Indians, but it's not. On one side of the conflict were England and the colonists. On the other side were the French, who were allied with Native Americans. So, the French and Indian War is really the British fighting against the French and Indians. Take a look at this map on the right. You can see that 13 colonies go from the east coast of North America up to this line here, this white line, which is formed by a mountain range called the Appalachians. The Appalachians run up and down the east coast, about 200 miles inland from the coast. They form the border between England's 13 colonies and the French colonies in North America. The French and Indian War was a turning point for a number of reasons, and for now I want you to note two of them. Number one, the first important effect of this war is that it united the colonists for the first time. Remember, the 13 colonies were all pretty different. Someone living in New England didn't feel a lot of connection to someone in, say, Georgia. But now that all the colonists had to fight against the same enemy, France, they all shared a common goal, and that brought them together. This picture here is a famous print that a British colonist in Pennsylvania named Benjamin Franklin made to encourage the colonists to unite. Look carefully at this image because you're going to be writing about it tomorrow. The snake is divided into sections, each one bearing the initials of the 13 colonies. This image was spread widely in the 13 colonies and helped unite the colonists against the French. So the French and Indian War was the first big step towards colonial unity. And that's important because without unity, the colonists never would have rebelled against the British a few years later. And the second important effect of this war was about land. England won the French and Indian War. The colonists defeated the French. And as a result, England gained a lot of new land that had formerly been controlled by the French. On the left here are the 13 colonies before the war. Remember, they only went as far west as the Appalachian Mountains. That's this white line. But the map on the right shows the British colonies after the war. You can see that the British lands now extended well beyond the Appalachians all the way to the Mississippi River. So England gained a lot of land. All right, it's time to review the objectives. Let me go back to them. If you don't know the answer to any of them, just rewind the video and review, and I will see you in class. Bye, students.